But
All right, as everything comes on to Bridges Live, this is Dr. Paul, and we're here at another podcast. And as my live feed goes on to YouTube, to Instagram, to Twitter, to all you lovely people out there, I want to welcome you to Bridges Live. This is Dr. Paul. Again, my show is about information, understanding, and action. And if you have any questions, we might not get to a lot of your questions because there's more to talk about and we can answer later. You can always inbox me at Dr. Paul, wdyer@gmail.com, or hit me in the inbox here at any of your social media. I have a dear friend of mine on, we've been friends for a very long time, and we want to talk about education. Dr. Fred, please introduce yourself, and we'll go right in and let people know who you are, so this way they can say, man, this guy knows what he's talking about.
oh, I wish that were true. Hi, I'm Fred DiUlus. I'm the chairman, founder, and president emeritus of Global Academy, which is a 20-plus-year-old firm that specializes in building universities online. And with the advent of the COVID, it seems to have ignited a whole lot of issues. And certainly we feel we're somewhat expert in being able to do this. But more importantly, what's occurred, as you know, Paul, is the fact that a lot of people got into this thinking it was easy, slam dunk, 2 days to prepare, and let's teach the kids, and found out that it was a horrible, horrible mistake by throwing unskilled teachers into the mix. And we've been following this very closely, and hopefully more and more schools will be opened up so the kids can get back to school.
We are having a crisis. I mean, we might as well just call it, this is probably the largest education crisis in the history of education.
Certainly in the United States and Canada as well. North America has been really impacted. But the place where it started in China, you can bet they're not released. They're not in school. They're in school, which is bizarre because they never quit school. I mean, only in the affected places where they really had a high level of the disease running around rampantly, they shut down. But with the schools, they pack 100 kids in a classroom. There's no problem. And they've been doing this ever since the COVID started.
But what are they saying about all this infection with kids and an infection and who's getting infected and how they're getting infected and the alarm? They're banging the bells in the pot saying, freeze, stay at home. And so what's going on?
Well, what's going on simply is it's fear. The whole idea was let's shut them down. We'll help stall the virus. And if you're familiar, and I know most of your audience is, with the flu, when it hits, and then it dissipates because of herd mentality or herd immunity. And that was not permitted to occur. Essentially, we got stuck in a rut, and the more cases were, the more people shut down. The more the fear spread, the more people shut down. And in fact, what they're finding now is that was really counterproductive. So looking at the kids are immune basically from age 0 to 14. The high school kids, a little less, but mostly all of them all the way up through grade 12. Teachers, most of them under 40. Percentages are even low in terms of virus infection. 97% are virus-free. So we're looking at statistics coming out of CDC on this. 99.97% of the kids in that age bracket will not contract the COVID. Even the extended viruses now with the
Right.
add-ons, it doesn't affect them. And so instead of using this information in a positive way, we just turned out and scared the hell out of all the teachers. It's unfortunate. But the real affected population were people my age. Anybody over 75 was impacted tremendously by this disease. So I've been in hiding ever since. But
and I'm glad you're safe too, because you were stuck in one place and then you had to wait until it cleared up a bit before you were able to move to your where you are right now. Right. So why aren't we following the science? What is So somehow someone's getting something from this by keeping this home. Is it the school board? Is it the money they're making? Is it the money that's not? What is going on then?
Well, the latest statistic is that if we open up the schools tomorrow in the districts that they're closed, 84% of the teachers would go back. That means 24% will still stick it out and refuse to go back.
But they're actually saying that the unions are saying that's not what they want.
I don't want to get into a debate over the unions. I think it's some of it's a lot of it, not some of it is politically motivated. It depends on what they're trying to get their hands on, whether they want more money, whether they want more insurance.
They want something.
Yes, they want something. And, of course, you're dealing with two of the largest districts in the country, and that's in New York and in Los Angeles. It's the director of the education department in Los Angeles, the school district, which is the largest, said, well, we'll open up the day after the election. My God, if that not was a political emphasis right there, and they're still not open, by the way, but that's beside the point. But it's kind of interesting.
Which is funny because he was just caught taking his child to school.
You're talking about the Berkeley superintendent.
Yeah, the Berkeley superintendent was just caught taking his child to school.
Absolutely.
A private school. It was a private school. We got to put that out there.
Yes.
So some of the private schools have gone back. They're like, okay, we're just going. Oh,
the majority of the private schools are operating. And I think the thing that's interesting is that it really has to deal with school choice. And, of course, that's a political issue. So, excuse me, but if I could put my child in a school and the public schools aren't taking my child, that child, if I can afford it, it's going to a private school. That's just the bottom line. The other thing that people are overlooking, and the politicians have not been criticized for this, is the ones who are keeping kids out of school have their kids in private school. Wait a minute. Does that make sense to you?
No, it doesn't.
Okay. The element is that you can't take political sides here when it comes to the kids. It's just asinine to do that. You're either concerned about the kids or you're concerned about some virus that allegedly may kill you someday. Well, we're all going to die. The question is that how? And unfortunately, most people think that this thing has to be eradicated entirely before they're going to let the kids back in school.
That's impossible.
That's impossible. It's absolutely impossible.
I know the CDC has just either heard how much they're willing to spend $1 billion to study the effects of long-term for children. And some children are having some long-term effects. I mean, we've only been in this about approximately a year anyway, so we won't know anything until years to come. What are some of the options parents can have that they have not looked at if they can? What are you thinking?
There's 3 different ways they can go, but I want to address your issue about some of the long-term effects on kids. The long-term effects have already settled in. We've got mental disorders, suicide rates higher level than we've ever had before. Right. And unfortunately, this also has to deal with the parents. The parent suicide rates going up, as well as the mental distress. And this creates disharmony in a family. And those of us that are family-oriented see this as a real threat to the nuclear family. The item here is that there's not been enough concentration on this. Now, the CDC can study all day long about the long-term effects, but let's look at the short-term effects first. Okay. What's going on with these kids, and why are they this way, and how long is it going to take us to get them back on track again? Kids don't want this. They want to go back to school. They want to be social animals. They want to be their buddies and friends. And I think the dilemma for parents is they were thrown into this mix, took it for a while, and now are beginning to question the validity of it as they see their kids falling further and further behind academically. This is hurting my heart because I know a lot of the black communities, they're so far behind. The gap is incredibly increased, tremendously. I know parents specifically who are suffering from this, who are just and it's not just a black, but it's a lower income issue. Any disenfranchised community or a community that is under the weather is going to be impacted the worst. If I live on Fifth Avenue in New York City, I don't have a problem because I can afford to send my kid anywhere I want.
Correct.
The difference is that this is not about the population being all able to do that. So what steps can they take? There is a couple of things. First of all, school choice is a big item. And there still are schools that parents can put their kids into, get grants to do it, pull together with other parents. That's one way to do it, but this costs money. Mm-hmm. So unless the kid can get a scholarship or unless the school has room, which is unlikely at this juncture, then they've got to look at other choices. Well, parents can homeschool. If they're working, how are they going to homeschool?
Right.
And most of them who do work are working from home. So who's using a computer? It's almost damned if you do and damned if you don't.
And that's if you have Wi-Fi, or if you're able to afford Wi-Fi.
Right. Now, the one great thing is that most cities are wired for Wi-Fi. All we need to do is be able to get the equipment to the kids so that they can use it, because most of them are familiar from school days. They know how to use them, and most have cell phones. The number of percentages of cell phones in the United States is over 90-some%. So that means that even into the most remote areas, they may not have Wi-Fi. That was brought out to me the other day. I said, what is the chances of that? I mean, maybe some places in Appalachia or in Alaska, but it was certainly most of the country is covered by Wi-Fi. That means kids have a way to get in. The problem is the parents may not be able to afford the stuff, technology. Well, while the government's spending all this money bailing out cities who went bankrupt, why not give some of that money to the parents to be able to afford, or give the parents the electronic equipment they need for their kids to be able to get online?
Fred, you know, you've been in education a very long time. I'm not going to throw out your age. I think you already did a bit. But I don't think education has ever been a true priority for our country. Is that easy to say, or is that just seems more significant recently?
You hit the nail on the head. Unfortunately, it's been ignored. Depends, and I don't care what side of the political equation you're on. They've both done a terrible job in doing what they needed to do here. And unfortunately, if you criticize one, they automatically pigeonhole you into the other side. If you criticize the existing power, then you're automatically thrown to the other side. I get this all the time. It's unfortunate because it's the kids that are at stake here. Hello, people. They belong to all of us. So the question is, are we going to allow them to rot and fall further behind? We're already ranked in the 30s in education around the world. That's pathetic. We used to be number 3 or 4, and this has all happened within the last 12 years. It's kind of interesting that it went through not only a Republican administration, but a Democratic administration back to a Republican administration, and the position did not rise at all.
No, it didn't change. It didn't change one bit.
It did not change one bit. So what's the solution? The solution is the parents need to get active within the school boards and the school operations around the country. We've backed off. When I was a kid, parents were like at that school board meetings every time they had one, at every parent-teacher meeting, etc. That's not the way it is anymore. They just let it go. They've let it go. They assume that it's in good hands, and we're watching curriculum changes. We're watching schools not opening. We're watching, well, we were going to open last week, but we can't now because we got a new strain coming in. Any excuse to keep the kids out of school.
I think parents are able to pick up their pitchforks and their torches and storm the school board.
It would be almost advisable. There is a group in Berkeley, California, and you know that Berkeley is left of left. I mean, it's really having lived and worked in the Bay Area for years, I can tell you it was a world unto its own.
They have a world. They do have their own world.
Yes, indeed. But the interesting thing is that a group of mums, MUMZ, I believe that's what it is. Nobody knows who they are, but they are the ones that have organized against the schools being closed in Berkeley, and by hook or crook, they're going to get those schools open. But they've and they're the ones that exposed the superintendent. They're the ones that got the union leader exposed who took his kid to a private school. So this is a groundswell. It's a backlash right now. I don't know how fast it'll move across the country. But today I heard that Chicago had some underpinnings of the same thing going on.
Chicago's in a bad way. These major big cities, they're just suffering. for a lot of reasons, economically. Does this really come down to money?
No.
It doesn't. Okay.
No. There's plenty of money.
Okay.
The question is, it's allocation. Now, if you were to go and say, well, the unions need to be reorganized, and the people that are in power need to be kicked out, and new union leaders elected, you say that, and you're in trouble. If you're a politician,
they still can't find
you're in trouble.
They still. So, and I'm a Giant fan, and they still can't find Hoffa.
So this is what we're dealing with. I was very familiar with the California Teachers Association years ago, and they were very big union supporters, obviously. But there was the FTA, and that was more radical than the CTA. And so depending on which one of these associations you belonged to really said which side of the equation you were. So as California moved, they began to take over the more liberal side of the teachers union began to take control. For a time in Florida, I lived next door to the guy who was one of the main reasons why the unions grew so quickly in the state of Florida, which was a good thing because the teachers were underpaid. They weren't put in the right place. There was, as far as teacher balance and equality going on, as far as teachers were concerned, it was all haywire. He changed that, but he also went to jail. And that was because he couldn't keep his hands out of the till. And that's unfortunate. When you get a leader that's good and then all of a sudden they go bad, it changes the whole dynamic. I'm not saying all union leaders have this, but it's becoming almost as though I care about me, I don't care about you, and as long as I got the power and I can make the political contributions, they're going to do what I say.
Now,
so until you give me what I want, we're not moving an inch.
We talked about the lower school, elementary, junior high, high school. Now we go into the higher education, and they're now looking at their money that they're losing to the online situations that they have to develop to keep kids paying their tuition. The same fee they were if they were going into the building. Now, how is that going to happen? That's got to be reconstructed.
Well, there's a groundswell of movement right now for free tuition in the community colleges. Higher level is a different story, but the movement is there as well. Well, if there's free tuition, where's the money going to come from?
Okay.
All right. Now, I'm a proponent of free education. It really sounds kind of radical, but it is not. We know that free tuition colleges work, but they're online. They are not regular colleges as we know them, the traditional education.
Right.
One of the pieces that I published out there just at about March, I believe, April, was that traditional education as we know it is dead.
Yes.
And the reason is that they had no idea how impacted this would be on the mainstream schools. Well, unbeknownst to most people, most of the bigger schools already had in play online education. As a matter of fact, Arizona State now enrolls more students, full-time enrolled students, vis-a-vis their online education than they do in their massive ground school. The situation was and is that ground school is lessening in the number of students enrolled, and online education, if it's worth a tinker's damn, is increasing disproportionately. In other words, if I have a 12% decline in standard ordinary classroom, I'm have a 20% increase in online. So the revenue is essentially the same, if not more so, because of the fact they don't have to maintain facilities, they don't have to maintain staff, and so on and so forth. And they're finding that, golly, University of Phoenix, no wonder they made so damn much money.
That's right.
So the thing boils down to, where is our money going to come from? Well, faculty can teach not only at one university, but teach at multiple universities online. We've known this for 20 years, but the mainstream is just now beginning to catch up. And I think to answer your question, the traditional school as we know it, Paul, is imploding. In other words, do we need to build that new science building? Do we need to do this? Do we need to do that when we can actually do school online and immersive technology. And immersive technology is basically the old game stuff.
Right.
Where you walk into the classroom and you say, "Hi, Joe. Hi, Mary. How are you?" And they may be from Spain, they may be from Malaysia, but they're standing right alongside of you. This is revolutionizing education as we know it. And when I talk to people, I said, "Are you familiar with Star Trek?"
Right, with the virtual learning.
Right. And they say, "Well, yeah." I said, "Do you remember the holodeck?"
Yep.
They would walk into the holodeck and they could recreate a world inside it. That technology is already available within a 12 by 12 space. You set that space out in your house, you can walk into any room and be joined by somebody else. It's unreal. It seems almost 24th century, but it's not. It's 21st century. The conversion, Paul, is going to be very hard for schools. They have to find other ways to utilize their facilities.
And is that the pushback that we'll get for online education, is that they don't know what to do with their buildings?
Oh yeah. Yeah, I mean, if you're a facilities manager at a major university, you're watching students erode under you because that's what's happened. Then you're saying, how are we going to utilize these buildings? How are we going to pay for these buildings? Why are we spending hundreds of millions of dollars on these buildings when they're not going to be utilized?
Well, we have enough homeless people that need shelters.
Well, there are alternatives, and that's certainly a good one. I mean, if we can put them in hotels, we can certainly put them in schools.
Mm-hmm.
You know, which would be a hell of a lot more comfortable than trying to deal with a hotel that doesn't want them.
I mean, you look at the Seattle issue right there with Tent City. There's like over 300-400 people right there in Seattle just living in tents.
Right. The homeless people that I'm familiar with was when I lived in New York. That was the only time I ever really had firsthand experience of homeless. And I always felt that these are civilized people.
Right.
They need to have some place to go, something to do. You can't just dismiss them out of hand, because if you do, you're really hurting society. And the equation, if you've traveled to South America and seen the poverty that exists in places like that, they look at a homeless person here in the United States as being rich. I mean, it's really a matter of perception and reality. And there's much we can do right now, but we're not focused on that. They're focused on how are we going to get them back in school? How are we going to keep the tuitions up?
Right.
That's not the problem. That's a short-term issue that can be addressed readily. But you need to think in terms of 5 and 10 years. What are these facilities going to be used for? Let me go back to your tuition question. Initially, when online higher education came out, schools were actually charging more money for online degrees. That's hard to believe, but they were. So the percentage, and the student wasn't taking advantage of any of the facilities they were paying for,
right?
But they were paying more tuition. Then they balanced out. Tuition was the same. Well, it's still inequitable, because if I'm not having access to the buildings, the gym, the tennis courts, and all the stuff that goes with, the swimming pools, etc., I'm paying more for somebody else to enjoy when I should have a break on how much it costs me.
Great.
Well, if we use a scenario that basically says, I'm going to try a Walmart approach here. I'm going to give you what you want for a lower price. And so by the numbers, I will make up the difference. Mm-hmm. They don't see it that way. They look at it from the standpoint, well, we got to have $15,000 a year, or we've got to have $40,000 a year just to sustain our application. No, you don't.
No, you don't.
Let's double your student population. Let's triple your student population. And who are your students? They're not just in little Podunk, USA with a 100-mile radius. They're worldwide.
They're worldwide. And so now there are some schools that just forego the SAT and the SAT, or the ACT, the SAT, to get into the school. And I thought that was a smart thing to do. It
is. Well, they learned from the University of Phoenix. I hate to use this as an example, but listen, there is no SAT, ACT. You self-destruct. If you can't cut it, you don't go back.
Right.
Okay. Well, if I take an SAT and I get admitted to State U, and I can't make it through the first semester, I self-destruct. I'm out of there. I'm emptying the chair for somebody who can sustain this. We are finally realizing that not everybody needs to go to college.
Correct.
And there are enough technical schools out there today that you can earn a darn good income without a college degree. We've known this for 30 years, but it has never been able to push itself to the forefront. So when a high school counselor is talking to a student, so, well, what do you want to be? Well, you have to go to college. No, they don't.
No, you don't.
If they performed radically in high school, their attention span about getting through college is about the same as it was in high school, unless they radically change somewhere along the line. But they may be a great technician. They may be a great refrigeration guy. They may be a woman who can really do medical tech work, or a man that can do extraordinary skills. There is today, when they talk about gender, there is no gender when it comes to education.
No.
You can basically pick out what you want to do. You don't need to tell me what you are to be able to qualify for it.
And we know we've been talking about this for 10 years, that I know that the technical field has been diminished to almost, we can't build a house there's so many builders who, the electricians, the plumbers, they have so many jobs because you couldn't get one set to just build a house. They probably have 15, 20 other jobs going on all at one time.
Simultaneously, we've experienced that here. It is a nightmare. And think that somebody would say, okay, I'm going to have a special commission here, and we're going to look at the future, and then we're going to back it off, where we want to go and how we're going to get there. That's not the way they plan. Businesses are a lot smarter than the schools are. If I'm running a super corporation, I want to know where I'm going to be in 10 years, and if I'm seeing where my competitors are going, I'm going to start backing it up. And if I don't, I know I'm gone. Mm-hmm. But see, they don't have that same threat. They know that they're always going to get legislative assistance. They know they're always going to get money. They don't even know what to do with it. We got $80 billion out there we're not even using for schools right now. It's a travesty based on what we're looking at. So there is an element, and I'm just talking about one state.
Right.
Itemized here is that there is incumbent on the parents, if they want their kids in school, to think about online education. That means somebody else teaching it, or be creating pods. The pod idea is not new.
No.
That's where a bunch of parents get together and say, okay, I'm in charge this day, you're in charge that day, and so on and so forth, and our kids are going to get educated. And it creates a social atmosphere for the kids. It creates the parents cooperative, basically. Why not? This is the way they did it in the pioneer days. So the object is the parents still have the control of the children.
And I hope parents know that.
Well, you know that we're probably one of the few nations in the world that still permits homeschooling. Mm-hmm. It is not just Christians doing homeschooling. My wife ran a homeschool association in New Mexico that consisted of every religion you could possibly think of: Hindu, Muslim, Catholic, Protestant, evangelical, etc. All born into one, and atheist. Even had one or two of those families. But it was an eclectic mix. It's just like a regular school. Only difference is the kids are all different ages. It's like going to an old Western school where you had kids in the first grade.
Schoolhouse, right?
Yeah, right, schoolhouse. But it's a great education, and unfortunately, the stigma for homeschooling has long been overcome. It's unfortunate.
Well, I know there's so much more to talk about this, but I just want people to know that there's an option out there. There's some research out there. There are people that you can get a hold of to see your options. And I think so many parents feel like they're out of options. And they're not. They actually have this exploded your options for voucher system. That can be pushed. School choice is what you mentioned. Is with those things can be pushed and saying, you know what? I need to make a decision. Now you need to make a choice. And now I need to go to the people that's not allowing me to make my choice.
I do not understand why somebody hasn't come along, particularly at the upper levels, has not come along and said, okay, we provide assistance, food assistance to families that can't afford it. Why did we not give them school assistance? Wait a minute. They oftentimes have as many kids as anybody else does, but their kids aren't getting it. They can't put their kids anyplace else. They got to take whatever school is thrown at them and said, I don't want my kid to go to that school. It's going to turn out like I turned out. Right. I want my child to be better than me. We become less so our kids become greater. And that's not doing it, and we're not helping them. We need to be able to do that. And the legislatures can do that. They're ignoring it, but they need to be able to do that. It's obvious. It needs to be. The COVID has really forced us into this mindset. So, Paul, we need to close down the inner city schools that aren't cutting it
Yep.
We need to create new opportunities for the parents. And if I got to bus your students from inner city to the subs,
then bus them.
Great. We can do it. We did it during the years when we forcibly integrated the schools in the South. We can do it again. There is no limit as to what we can do. None.
And I thank you, Fred, for coming on, talking with me, Bridges Live, talking about education. There's more to talk about. I know you'll be having a podcast coming up here pretty soon here. I know because I'm going to help you launch this so we can talk more and get more into the hows, the whats, the nuts, and the bolts. So thank you so much, Fred, for visiting with me this evening.
My pleasure, Paul. Always a pleasure with you.
Thank you, sir. Have a great night.
Thank you. You too.